Titan's Gate was more than a fortress. It was the shield of Earth, a colossal orbital ring bristling with cannons and hangar bays, circling Saturn like a crown of steel. For decades, the Zeroth swarm had clawed at the edges of human space, but Titan's Gate had stood unbroken, until today. The battle began without warning. Ilara Vey had just finished strapping the last evacuee into a lifeboat when the first shockwave hit. The entire station shuddered as if the planet below had screamed. Sirens wailed through the decks. Artificial gravity flickered. The bulkheads trembled like paper beneath a storm. "Zeroth breach on sectors 7 through 12, a voice shouted over the comms. "All personnel to combat stations." Ilara grabbed her rifle, sprinting down a corridor that reeked of ozone and fire. Marines ran past her, their boots hammering the deck, their faces tight with the grim knowledge that Titan's Gate had finally cracked. Then came the roar. Through a viewport, she saw them, the enemy fleet spilling from the void. Sleek black serpentine cruisers twisting like living shadows, swarms of smaller craft darting between them like wasps. They moved with unnatural precision, their weapons glowing green before lances of plasma carved through the human defense line. The 7th Fleet was already in formation, ships maneuvering desperately. Human destroyers vomited missiles into the dark, fighters screamed into the fray. But for every alien ship that burned, 3 more replaced it. Ilara pressed her back against the wall as the hull around her shook with impacts. Sparks rained down. A squadmate was thrown into the air as a blast tore through the floor beneath them. She scrambled to her feet, dragged the man out, ignoring the pain lancing through her shoulder. Above all the chaos, a voice thundered across every comm channel, steady and commanding. "This is Commander Adrian Cade. Hold the line. Civilians come first. You will not break." The sound of his voice cut through fear like a blade. Everyone knew his name. Cade wasn't just a commander, he was the figure who had stood at every desperate battlefield humanity had faced in the last decade. He never flinched, never wavered. When he spoke, people obeyed. Ilara clung to that voice as she dragged the wounded Marine toward the evacuation decks. Explosions rocked the hallways, forcing them through smoke-filled passages. Dozens of civilians surged past in panic, herding children into the pods. Titan's Gate was collapsing, and still, they fought to save others. Suddenly, a blast door sealed shut ahead of her. Over the comms, Cade barked an order. "All units, clear Deck 24. The swarm's cutting straight through it." "I'll hold them off." Ilara froze. Deck 24 was where he was. Through the viewport, she caught a glimpse of the Vigilant Dawn, Cade's flagship, diving headlong into the swarm like a spear of light. Its railguns spat fire, ripping apart enemy craft. Its flak cannons carved holes in the waves of swarm fighters. But the swarm didn't retreat. They closed in, sacrificing themselves to drag the ship deeper into the killing field. "Commander, pull back!" An officer screamed into the comm. "We can regroup on the far side." But Cade's reply was iron. "Negative. If they break through here, the civilians don't make it." "Hold your ground!" Ilara's heart pounded as she watched the flagship vanish into a sea of black ships. Missiles detonated. Plasma bolts sliced through armor. For every enemy destroyed, 10 more closed around it. Then came the blinding flash. A Zeroth dreadnought, massive and grotesque, unleashed a barrage that split the void. The Vigilant Dawn reeled, fire ripping across its hull. The ship twisted, venting atmosphere and flame, vanishing behind the swarm's shadow. The comms erupted with static. Then silence. Ilara screamed his name into the channel until her voice broke. Others did the same, their voices hoarse with disbelief, denial, rage. No answer came. The commander was gone, and with his loss, the line crumbled. Titan's Gate broke apart in fire and ruin, its great cannons silenced one by one. Human ships fled, covering the last evacuation craft as the swarm tore into the remains of the station. Ilara stumbled into the lifeboat bay, shoving the wounded Marine inside, her face streaked with soot and tears. She turned once more to the viewport and saw Saturn's ring reflect the fire of a dying fortress. The shield of Earth had fallen, and Adrian Cade, the one man who had made humanity believe they could never lose, was gone. The war didn't stop when Titan's gate fell. The swarm surged into the inner system, hammering Mars, choking Earth's skies with burning debris. Every city bore scars, collapsed towers, broken bridges, endless refugee camps. Humanity fought like cornered wolves, but the losses kept piling. Ilara Vey survived. Sometimes she wished she hadn't. Her days were spent running extractions, smuggling survivors out of fallen zones, pulling corpses from rubble. At night, when silence pressed heavy, her mind replayed the last moments of the vigilant dawn. The blinding flash, the static overcoms, the silence that followed. Every failure had a face, but Adrian Cade's haunted her most. He wasn't just a commander. He was proof that one person could hold the line when entire fleets faltered. And when he vanished, so had something vital inside her. By winter, Earth's resistance carved out hidden sanctuaries, cold valleys, deep caves, drowned tunnels beneath ruined cities. Norway's mountains became one such refuge. There, carved into a slope of white granite, stood a row of gravestones, memorials to the fallen. Not bodies. There were rarely bodies to bury, but names, etched so people could mourn. Ilara came one morning when the world was frozen still. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she followed the narrow trail between pines. Frost clung to her lashes. She hadn't worn her uniform. The war had burned the pride out of it. Instead, she wore a heavy black coat, plain and unmarked. The valley was quiet. Only the wind and the faint whisper of prayer flags strung between stones. Survivors had placed them there, ragged cloth strips painted with ink, fluttering messages of love and loss. And then she found it, a single stone among many, its inscription cut deep into polished marble. Commander Adrian Cade, defender of humanity. Her legs weakened, and she sank to her knees in the snow. She thought she would feel numb. But instead, it came rushing back, the weight of Titan's gate crumbling. The helpless scream in her throat when his ship went dark. The endless nights since then where she dreamed she'd reached him in time. She pressed her hand to the cold stone. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry I didn't save you." It wasn't the first time she'd whispered those words, but here, at his grave, they cut deeper. "I should have fought harder. I should have gone after you. I should have done something." Her throat burned. "You always carried us, Adrian. And when it mattered most, I wasn't there for you." The wind carried her confession into the valley. Around her, the snow seemed to muffle the world, a cocoon of silence where grief could live without shame. Other survivors sometimes came to this place to weep, to leave flowers or tokens, but today she was alone with her failure. For minutes, maybe hours. She stayed like that, bowed before the stone, speaking to it like it might answer. She told him about the war dragging on, about the people still fighting, about how Earth needed his voice now more than ever. She told him how tired she was, how every breath felt borrowed, and still she apologized, again and again. Then the silence shifted. At first, she thought it was the wind changing direction. A faint crunch behind her, like snow giving way under weight. Her breath caught. She stiffened but didn't turn, her hand still pressed to the stone. Ilara, her name, spoken rough, low, but unmistakable. Her heart stopped. That voice. She whipped around. Snow scattering from her coat, and there he was. Adrian Cade stood not 10 paces away, framed by the trees. His armor was battered, scorched black in places, patched with strange metal she didn't recognize. His face was gaunt, drawn by suffering, his beard unshaven. But his eyes, those steady, unyielding eyes, burned with the same fire she'd thought lost forever. She couldn't breathe. He was alive. Her knees refused to rise. Her hands trembled against the grave marker. Her mind screamed that it was impossible. She had watched his ship disappear. She had mourned him. Yet here he stood, scarred and real, snow steaming on his armor like smoke. Adrian's voice broke the silence again, hoarse but resolute. "You did save me, Ilara, just not the way you think." The wind howled through the valley, but she barely heard it. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The man she had buried in her heart, the ghost she'd carried in guilt, was standing alive before her. And in that impossible moment, grief cracked open into something sharper, stranger, hope. Alara's breath misted in the cold air as she stared at the impossible. Adrian Cade, a man whose name was already carved into stone, walked toward her with the weight of battles written in every scar. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, that grief had finally broken her mind. But when he placed a gloved hand on her shoulder, solid and heavy, reality crashed down. How? Her voice shook, equal parts wonder and accusation. Adrian's jaw tightened. Because the Zeroth wanted me alive. He led her away from the graveyard, deeper into the trees where no ears could overhear. His steps were steady, his eyes scanning every shadow, soldier's instinct still intact. Only when they reached a frozen stream did he stop and begin. They didn't destroy the vigilant dawn. They tore it apart and swallowed what was left. My ship, my crew. They were dragged into one of their dreadnoughts. A hive ship. Alara's gut clenched. She had seen those monsters from afar. Massive living fortresses bristling with weapons, their hulls pulsing like skin. Nobody who entered ever came out. They studied us, Adrian continued. His tone was flat, like steel hammered too many times. Every move, every tactic. They wanted to know why we fight the way we do, why we never stop, even when logic says surrender. His gaze darkened. They dissected my men to learn it. Alara swallowed hard, bile rising in her throat. And you? They kept me alive longer. I broke free whenever I could. Killed guards, sabotaged systems. They thought they were teaching me their ways. They didn't realize I was learning theirs. His lips curled into something grim, almost savage. I learned how their ships breathe, how their weapons grow, how their command nodes link. And one night, when their overmind focused on another battle, I cut through their core and bent the hive to me. Alara blinked, disbelief chasing her words. You captured a Zeroth dreadnought? Adrian nodded once. It's orbiting above us now, cloaked. Half dead, but mine. Humanity's first real weapon against them. She couldn't decide whether to laugh or shiver. The thought of a single man seizing control of a hive ship was insane. But this was Adrian. He had done the impossible before, and the fire in his eyes told her this wasn't madness. It was truth. And the war? She asked, forcing her voice steady. Adrian's expression turned grave. The swarm you've seen so far is nothing. They've only been testing us, bleeding us. The true assault is coming. The overmind itself is moving. The words hit her like a blade. She had heard whispers, rumors among refugees and soldiers alike. A single vast intelligence, buried in a living moon, guiding every claw and cannon. If that being came to Earth, resistance wouldn't matter. Humanity wouldn't just lose. They'd be erased. Adrian leaned close, lowering his voice as if even the forest could betray them. We can't win with fleets and fortresses. We've tried. We fail every time. The only chance is to strike first. Use their own weapon against them. Cut out the heart before it reaches Earth. Alara stared, snow melting on her lashes. You mean, take that dreadnought straight at the overmind? His silence was answer enough. You're insane, she whispered, though her chest burned with something dangerously close to belief. Maybe, Adrian said, the ghost of a smile tugging his lips. But insanity is all we've got left. The forest fell quiet again, save for the distant howl of wind. Alara's mind raced. Part of her wanted to grab him, drag him back to the survivors, force him to rest, to heal. Another part, the part that remembered Titan's gate, that remembered his voice rallying entire fleets, wanted to follow him into the stars right now. Finally, she asked the only question that mattered. When? Adrian's eyes met hers. They burned, not with hope, but with the iron certainty of a man who had already died once. Soon, he said, before the swarm arrives in full. Gather who you trust. I'll take the rest, she nodded, though her stomach twisted. He was back from the grave, yes, but not to live. He had returned only to lead humanity's most desperate gamble, and Alara, for reasons she couldn't fully name, knew she would follow him again, into fire, into void, into hell itself. The dreadnought was alive. Alara had felt uneasy the first time she set foot inside it. The corridors pulsed faintly, as though veins ran beneath the walls. The floors hummed, soft yet unyielding with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Strange organic vents exhaled warm air that smelled faintly of ozone and blood. The ship was both machine and beast, and every time she walked its halls, she wondered if it remembered being theirs before Adrian had seized control. But under Adrian's command, the monster moved like a weapon forged for vengeance. He stood at the heart of the control chamber, surrounded by a crown of alien nodes now wired into human consoles. His hands rested on an interface of bone and metal that pulsed under his touch like living skin. His scars caught the sickly light, making him look less like a man and more like a revenant, half human, half ghost, wholly unbreakable. "We break their spine tonight," he told the crew. His voice carried no hesitation. The volunteers, barely 50 of them, were a mix of Marines, pilots, engineers, and refugees who had chosen this suicide run-over waiting for the swarm to erase Earth. They had no uniforms, no formal ranks anymore. What bound them was Adrian's voice, the same iron certainty that had once held Titan's gate. When the dreadnought tore out of orbit, Elara braced herself against the shift. It didn't move like human ships, no burn of thrusters or steady acceleration. Instead, it lunged forward in sudden bursts, vanishing through rifts in space with a shudder that rattled teeth. Each jump felt like falling into a predator's maw. And then, the swarm appeared. They emerged from subspace like a tide blotting out the stars. Thousands of ships, from darting knife fighters to leviathans the size of cities, all connected by the unseen threads of the overmind. Their formation was flawless, an endless wall of dark scales and burning eyes. Against that vastness, the few battered human cruisers already in orbit seemed like insects about to be consumed. The comms were a flood of panic. "This is the Dauntless. We can't hold. Our shields are collapsing. Fighter wings down to 20%. We need reinforcements. All units retreat." Retreat before, then the dreadnought burst from the void. Its weapons sang. Bioplasma cannons spat torrents of green fire that ripped through swarm squadrons. Graviton spears lanced outward, skewering enemy ships and crushing them into implosions of twisted metal and bone. A wave of parasite drones, reprogrammed by Adrian, streaked from its underbelly, tearing into enemy fighters and turning them against their own. The swarm reeled. For the first time in living memory, the Zeroth faltered. Elara gripped the gunnery controls, her hands slick with sweat as she fired again and again, channeling the ship's alien fury. Human frigates nearby caught sight of the impossible. The commander thought dead, leading a dreadnought against its makers, and their voices surged across comms. "By God, that's Cade! He's alive! He's fighting with us! All ships rally, form on the dreadnought's spearhead." What had been a rout turned into a charge. Human cruisers plunged back into the fight, launching missiles in synchronized volleys, carving holes where Adrian's weapons had shattered the swarm. Fighters swarmed like angry hornets, buying seconds where once they would have died without meaning. But the overmind adapted. Massive leviathans uncoiled from the darkness, their spines bristling with weapons larger than skyscrapers. They converged, focusing every beam and cannon on the stolen dreadnought. Shields flickered. Hull screamed as chunks of alien armor sloughed away under the assault. The beast groaned like it might break in half. "Forward!" Adrian bellowed over the cacophony. His hands slammed against the controls, forcing the ship into a straight-line charge. "No retreat! Drive into their heart!" Elara felt the deck tremble beneath her boots as the dreadnought clawed deeper into the swarm. The view ahead was chaos, ships colliding, explosions blossoming like suns, human vessels burning bright before being swallowed. Every kilometer forward came at a terrible cost. Inside the control chamber, smoke curled from ruptured conduits. Sparks rained down on the volunteers, but none faltered. Every man and woman there understood the truth. They weren't just fighting a battle. They were plunging a spear into the heart of the abyss. Elara's pulse hammered. Her fear had long since burned away, replaced by something fiercer. Watching Adrian command the beast, she realized the swarm had made its greatest mistake. They had tried to study humanity's defiance, tried to capture it, tame it. Instead, They had created a weapon they could never control, and now that weapon was aimed at their god. Ahead, the vast silhouette of the Overmind's heart ship loomed, a moon of chitin and fire, its surface crawling with jagged towers, its core pulsing with a light that felt alive. The very mind of the swarm, Adrian's voice cut through the roar, steady as ever. This ends here. The heart ship filled the void like a living nightmare. It wasn't just massive, it was wrong. Its surface shifted as though it breathed, towers of chitin flexing, spines writhing like tendrils reaching for prey. Its core pulsed with a rhythm that made Alara's stomach twist, each throb echoing in her skull as if the Overmind itself was brushing against her thoughts. And the dreadnought dove straight at it. Every screen lit up red as enemy fire slammed into them. Plasma bolts seared the hull, tearing strips of alien plating away. Shockwaves shook the decks until men and women stumbled, clinging to handholds slick with sweat. One engineer screamed as a conduit ruptured, spilling molten slag across the floor, but others dragged him aside and kept working, patching wires with bare hands. "Shields collapsing!" someone shouted. Adrian didn't flinch. His scarred fingers gripped the living controls, forcing the ship to lunge through the storm. "Ignore it! Forward!" Alara's console flashed warnings faster than she could silence them. Weapon arrays overheating, reactor bleeding energy, structural stress at critical. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except driving deeper, closer. She clenched her jaw and poured everything into the gunnery systems, unleashing volley after volley into the swarm pressing around them. Human ships fought alongside, carving a bloody path. A destroyer rammed an enemy cruiser head-on, detonating in a flash that ripped a gap in the formation. Fighters screamed past in suicidal arcs, diving into weak spots and burning themselves out just to buy another second. Every sacrifice pushed Adrian's spear point forward, but the swarm knew where they were heading. Leviathans shifted formation, blocking the path with walls of armored flesh. Biotentacles lashed out, coiling around the dreadnought's hull, dragging it off course. The deck buckled as the ship lurched sideways. "Ilara!" Adrian barked. She fired the graviton spears, their crackling beams slicing through the tendrils and flinging the Leviathans apart. The ship staggered free, engines groaning like a wounded beast. The heart ship loomed closer. Now they could see its vast eyes, thousands of them, opening along its surface, all fixing on the dreadnought. The Overmind had noticed them. "And it was angry," the voice came then. Not in words, but in every mind aboard. A suffocating pressure, a whisper in their bones. Frail sparks, futile defiance. "You will break." Several volunteers collapsed, clutching their heads, blood trickling from their noses. Ilara's skull felt like it was splitting, but Adrian stood unshaken, eyes burning. He bellowed over the storm, a roar so human, so defiant it cut through the psychic weight. "We don't break. We burn!" And the crew surged with him. The dreadnought slammed into the heart ship's outer shell, claws of alien alloy tearing through its armor. The impact hurled everyone from their posts, alarms shrieking. Hull plating groaned as the ship embedded itself like a blade in flesh. They were inside. The control chamber flickered with crimson light as systems collapsed. The dreadnought was dying, its organic hull screaming with every wound. But Adrian was already strapping the fusion warhead to his armor, movement steady, deliberate. Ilara staggered to her feet, horror freezing her blood. "What are you doing?" He turned, calm even with fire and smoke around him. "The Overmind's core is ahead. This ship won't last long enough to fire the payload. Someone has to carry it." She shook her head violently. "No, we can find another way. There is no other way." His voice was soft now, meant only for her. "You kept me alive long enough to get here. But this is where I end it." Ilara grabbed his arm, desperation cracking her composure. "Don't ask me to lose you again." Adrian's gaze softened for just a heartbeat, the commander giving way to the man. "You won't lose me." "Not this time. You'll carry me forward. In every battle after this. That's what matters." The deck split open, revealing the fleshy corridor into the Overmind's core. Heat blasted out, thick with the stench of blood and electricity. Adrian activated the warhead, its timer glowing blue across his chest. "Hold the line." "Ilara, "Whatever happens, make sure humanity survives." And before she could stop him, he strode into the breach, rifle blazing. A lone warrior walking into the abyss with a bomb strapped to his chest. The doors sealed behind him with a shuddering slam. For a long, shattering moment, the only sound in the chamber was the low hum of the dying dreadnought. Ilara pressed her forehead against the sealed bulkhead, fists trembling, her screams swallowed by the chaos around her. Adrian was gone again. But this time, he was walking into death by choice. Adrian marched alone into the Overmind's gut. The fleshy corridor closed behind him, sealing him inside. Each step sank into the pulsing floor, the walls slick and alive, shuddering with the rhythm of a colossal heartbeat. The psychic pressure grew unbearable, claws raking his mind, visions slamming into him, worlds burning, humans screaming, oceans boiling under alien skies. The Overmind whispered directly to him. "You are nothing, a drop of blood against a storm. Lay down your weapon. Yield, and I will spare your kind." Adrian spat blood and kept walking. The warhead hummed against his chest, its timer ticking down. Every alien guardian that surged at him was cut down by bursts of white-hot plasma, each shot carving tunnels through their armored flesh. He didn't fight for survival anymore. He fought for distance, for one more step toward the core. Behind him, the dreadnought buckled. Ilara screamed orders, dragging survivors into gun stations, venting fire through breaches. They bought Adrian seconds with their blood. The swarm hammered them mercilessly, but the humans refused to retreat. If he was to plant the blade, they would hold the hilt. Then he saw it, the core. It was vast, suspended in a chamber of bone and light, a colossal organ glowing with rivers of molten energy. Pulses rippled outward like solar flares, each one feeding the swarm outside. The psychic voice thundered now, furious. "You dare!" Adrian tore his rifle apart for its last charge, overloading the cell. He hurled it into the first wave of defenders, a sunburst explosion ripping them apart. With the path clear, he hurled himself at the core, the warhead clamped to its surface with a hiss. The timer dropped to its final digits. Adrian smiled grimly, whispering not to the Overmind, but to Ilara. "I told you. We don't break," and he slammed his palm onto the trigger. Light, blinding, endless, all-consuming. The core imploded, folding inward before erupting in a cataclysmic blast. A shock wave ripped through the heart ship, tearing its organs into shreds, cascading down its spines like wildfire. Outside, the swarm froze mid-flight, their eyes going dim as the Overmind's control shattered. Ships tumbled lifeless into the void. The entire armada convulsed, and then silence swallowed the stars. On the bridge of the dying dreadnought, Ilara watched the impossible. The heart ship cracked apart like a rotten seed, spewing chunks of glowing flesh into space. The psychic storm lifted, leaving behind only the faint hum of human engines. For the first time in years, the galaxy was quiet, but Adrian was gone. Ilara stood rigid, staring into the void where he had vanished. Her throat ached, but no sound came. Around her, the survivors cheered, cried, or simply collapsed, unable to process what they had endured. Humanity had won, but victory felt like a knife buried deep. The dreadnought limped away, dragging the wounded back toward Allied space. Salvage crews and medics worked in silence, their faces pale with exhaustion. Ilara refused to rest. She worked, barked orders, stitched broken systems together with raw wires. Anything to keep from thinking about the man who had walked into fire so that she could stand here now. Weeks later, they buried him, or tried to. There was no body, only fragments of armor recovered from the wreckage. They laid them beneath a stone on a quiet hill outside Earth's rebuilt capital. The war was over, but the scars still bled. Families wandered the memorial fields searching for names, whispering stories of those they'd lost. Ilara knelt at Adrian's grave long after the others had left. Her hands trembled as she touched the cold stone, words finally breaking free in a whisper. "I'm sorry I didn't save you." The night wind carried her voice away. For the first time in years, she wept, shoulders shaking, all the steel stripped from her. But she didn't hear the footsteps behind her. A shadow fell across the grave. Ilara. Her breath caught. Slowly she turned. Adrian stood there, scarred, gaunt, his armor half-charred but alive. Alive. Her heart stopped. "No, you—" He shook his head. His voice was rough, cracked from things he'd endured. "The warhead ripped me through a fold in the Overmind's core. I don't know how I crawled back, but I'm here." She rose unsteadily, every nerve screaming disbelief, and then threw herself into his arms. For the first time since the galaxy had burned, she felt whole. Adrian held her, staring over her shoulder at the sea of graves stretching into the horizon. "We paid in blood." "But we held the line," Ilara whispered fiercely, clinging to him. "You came back." And for once, Adrian smiled. Not as a commander, not as a warrior, but as a man who had defied the impossible. Humanity had survived. Because one of their own refused to kneel.